Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my first impressions of Troy. Slash previews, as I have played a fair bit of the game for, I don't know, I think I have around 3 hours in the game at this point. So, first impressions, kind of, right? Insightful first impressions, let's call them. I've been playing Total War games since Rome 1, and I like to think that I can have a, at least somewhat objective, at times, and informed and, well, I want to say relevant opinion of things, because I know how Total War works, I know how it evolved, so on and so forth, so I like to think that I have a somewhat relevant opinion on the entire franchise. So to that end, let me begin by introducing Troy to you. So the way I'm going to do this in this first impressions video is I've decided to cut it into two different bits, or two different segments. In the first one, I'm going to introduce you to the new and different mechanics that Troy has. So stuff like new resources, diplomacy, or the slightly different diplomacy, stuff like that. And the second one, we'll talk about the units and the combat. So first of all, the map. It's kind of small, and I think a lot of the criticism for the game was kind of unrelated to this, but I think it does warrant mentioning. Now, the map is very focused, so, there's lots of settlements and stuff like that. However, it is still pretty small. I mean, there's a lot of places to go, but a lot of it is also empty. Like, see, all of this, there's nothing here. I mean, there's a few settlements down here, I guess, but a lot of this is empty, and it feels like after a few runs from here and there, you're going to run into, it's going to get a little bit repetitive. But also, perhaps even more importantly, there are only 8 playable factions. 4 for the Trojans and 4 for the Achaeans. That's not great. There are lots of factions in the game controlled by the AI, and I think unlocking a few of them would have been really, really great as minor powers. They didn't have to have any special faction mechanics or units, but just to have the different options I think would be nice. That said though, on to nicer things, and that is the grand map, right? Here's the thing. Troy does a great job at providing us with a grand map that makes... with a grand map gameplay and grand map options that make the game quite interesting. What I mean is, now there are 3 different resources that you need to manage instead of just money. This is pretty darn important. Also, let's get a watchtower going, why not? Also, there is, not 3, there are 4 different resources plus gold. Gold is no longer your main resource. So, what gold is basically, it's the rarest resource, as it says. It is required for some special buildings, like something late up in the building browser, in some special buildings in the special slot, and also you recruit agents with gold. But it is a luxury item that's fairly scarce. Your main item, or your main resources would be food, wood, stone, and bronze. Now, these are what you use to actually maintain your troops, build buildings, and basically play the game, right? So, not only that, but also, let me end turn here, also what this adds is not just a new layer of depth to the economy, it also makes it so trade is now very important. And I'll try and demonstrate this with a diplomatic interaction, I hope. Yeah, sure. Lycia, for example, is in the middle of nowhere, and I have no intention of fighting them, plus we're on the same faction. So, let's go to them and go...
will bear fruit.
Oh, I was thinking they might want military access, but they don't. Never mind. Let's imagine that they did want military access. Well, let's just set up a deal between them. So, currently, I have a lot of food, and a lot of wood, and a lot of stone. Specifically, a lot of stone, though. So let's say I want to sell them 500 stone. They don't have a lot of stone. So they value it a lot more than they value food or wood. This means that for 500 stone, I can get 1,000 food, or even, let's try and push it a little bit more, 1,100? 1,200. Oh, wow, okay. $1,800 food. Wow, alright. Good. See, there you go.
I will.
You're gonna be... Whoops. Sorry about that. You're gonna be doing that quite a lot in this game, I found. And it's very convenient that you can see the economy down there, and it's color-coded with stuff that they're interested in. So right now, I've supplied them with stone. They don't really care about the resource that much. They want bronze, because that's what they have the least of at this stage. So essentially... also, this ties in with some of their traits and stuff like that as well. But basically, you're going to be doing that very, very often, because now trade is not actually just an agreement that you sign that gives you a bit of bonus cash. You actually do need to trade stuff, because depending on the provinces that you occupy, maybe you don't have a lot of access to stone, but you have tons of other resources. So you'll wanna, you know, maybe pay attention to those and exploit those while buying stone from other people that don't have food, for example, or stuff like that. And for this reason, the game actually does a great job at encouraging trade. Now, can I actually...
Onward we go.
No, I can't. Okay, let's then
Forward
move
march.
out of the way a little bit like this. Okay. So trade is now actually pretty darn important. Also, the game does a fairly good job at implementing the different mechanics from stuff like Three Kingdoms and Warhammer and stuff like that into itself on the campaign map level. So you have stuff like Royal Decrees, which is basically just a tech tree, right? The different things you can research, but they are fairly important and influential. Like, this gives plus 280 food per turn faction-wide. It's like an off-map resource generator, right? Pretty cool. But also, then you have Divine Will, which basically means you can pray to a certain god, and this will cost either money or food, or either money and food or food, and that will give you favor with the aforementioned god. So this will give you, for example, 70 favor, and this will give you plus 20 growth, plus 2 faction. So let's do Hector Tomb to Aphrodite,
Our feast is
like so, and Aphrodite now loves and respects us. So what this does is the ritual will cost 600 food and 30 gold, but it will give us 30 growth faction-wide and plus 3 happiness, for example. Plus there is a permanent bonus to Aphrodite being respected. So yeah, there's cults that level up. It's kind of like a religious mechanic in some respects. Okay, for now though, let's go with a siege battle, and I'm going to fight this out manually, but in a bit. First I want to talk about a couple of the other new mechanics. For example, there is also the leveling up system, which is kind of simple and I don't really like it. I much prefer the Warhammer one. Here what you do is you basically pick one or the other, right? And you pick this or this, this or this, this or this, and you go down the line. You can also upgrade the various things that you've picked. So, for example, that's these like bonus traits here that you can pick up. So, I much prefer the Warhammer system, but it is something. There is also equipment. So, again, that works in, you know, that feels like it's been implemented more from Three Kingdoms than Warhammer, but anyways, you know, it does exist. Also, there are these Stygian voices thing. So, commune with Elus, commune with all sorts of people, and what this will do is favor of all the gods will decrease, but you will get food, for example, and various bonuses. So, this is the sort of religious underworld and world of the gods communication and I guess back and forth nature of it all, and you know, the divines and the gods meddling in the affairs of mortals and stuff, and you can actually control that, and it's really interesting. So stuff like this is a new addition to the Total War series in some ways. It's kind of like, in some situations it's sort of like an overhaul of previous mechanics, but it incorporates it well into a new game, and it contributes a lot to the franchise. But now let's take a look at buildings, for example. So there are 5 slots of buildings, 4 in the minor settlements, 3 to 4 in the minor settlements, and 5 in the major settlements. These are ports, special buildings, which are the equivalent of landmarks in the in Warhammer and Warhammer 2, military buildings, so it's pretty obvious you can recruit different things, and also garrison buildings like Guard House and Guard Bastion. Administration, which is entertainment, recruitment, influence, growth, stuff like that. And finally, temples. So temples are, you know, just what it says. There's a whole heap of different temples dedicated to different gods. Each of them have their own different abilities that they give you, and they give you the favor of the previously mentioned god. For the minor settlements, it's pretty much the same, minus a few things. So the special buildings look a little bit different here. Ports are more or less the same. Military buildings are a little bit more limited, and you have a resource building, so these will provide various resources for you. So there's quite a bit of depth in the economy and the way the gods work and stuff like that, but there is a definite like meta that you can find and like maybe focus on a certain god because it gives you bonuses that work for your faction and so on and so forth. At the same time, though, the real problems with the game start with the battle map and the actual battles and the units themselves. So I think I've done an okay job at giving you a brief introduction to the different mechanics of the world, the rituals and stuff like that, but that's essentially what the overworld is, or the campaign map basically is. You build different buildings, assemble your units, and then you go to fight. Fighting has always been, I dare say, a bigger part of Total War than the strategy bit, because the strategy elements were always a little bit more streamlined and simple, and the combat was what was the focus of the game, more or less, at least for a lot of people. Here, though, yeah, about that. Well, combat is limited. Limited in the sense of there's not that many things you can recruit and build. So let's take a look at all the units for our factions. Infantry with two-handed spears, or swords. Again, infantry just with heavier armor, and infantry just with heavier armor. Chariots. Okay, you know, if they're going to replace the role of cavalry, I think that's fair enough, right? Chariots instead of cavalry, except these are archers, and then these are chariots. So that's a late game unit. There's no chariots beforehand. Okay, what do I use to maneuver around? Well, nothing. There's archer chariots here, and regular chariots here. It's a tier 3 building, though. Okay, what about this? Slingers and javelinmen. That's all. Now, there are units that you can spawn in, like mythological units and stuff like that, but they're so few and far in between that they're not really there. They're there to sort of spice things up and add a little bit to the game, but realistically speaking,
That will not work.
you can't expect too much from
Make
them.
them pay.
You're going to get them way late into the game. So what ends up being the problem is my army now looks like this. A heap of infantry with very little to distinguish between them. I mean, these looks like vastly different stats, and okay, in the example of these two, they kind of are because this is a later game unit, but let's take a look at, for example, this compared to this. Okay, less charge. Fair enough, that's relevant. Minus 4% melee attack. Well, minus 4 points melee attack. It's not that important. Slightly less HP. Minus 5 armor, so it's 20 instead of 25. 37 instead of, what, plus 11 to that, so it's like 48. Plus 48 speed instead of plus 37 speed. You can't have negative speed, but you know what I mean. Like 48 speed instead of 37, that's not that relevant. What about these guys? Okay, so they have fewer HP, but they have a little bit more morale and armor, and they have less speed, but they have more attack and defense and damage, but they have less charge. These are slight differences, slight variations, and what ends up happening on the battlefield is I'm not taking into account the stats of every one of these units, I'm just throwing them at the enemy most of the time. numbers superiority and all that, right? See, that's a problem. Now, the diplomacy is great. The entire faction mechanics are great. You can confederate members of your faction. That's good. Like, all of that stuff was ported over from different games and incorporated well into Troy. But the combat? There's no siege engines. I mean, this is the siege of the enemy capital. And I can build a battering ram. And that's it. Now, I understand the design decision behind it to some extent. You want to go for a more realistic, combining realism and myth into one game. And on paper, that's very, very interesting, but in reality, the game just gets boring. So what ends up happening with Troy is you now have this weird mix of really great and interesting faction and campaign map mechanics, and new resource systems and encouraging trade, and some of the good elements of Three Kingdoms have also been sort of bled into this game too. And then you have a combat system that really just, most of the time, doesn't cut it. Yeah. That's kind of a problem. That kind of really is a problem. Also, for example, you have this building, a Master Carpenter, which gives plus 125 wood per turn. Rude jokes, ha ha ha. But then, at the same time, in the same building, you have this, which gives 64. I get it that they cost less to build, but why would you? That's nitpicky. That's the little things, but really the main problem comes with the battles. And to that point, let's fight one and see exactly what's the problem and what's wrong with Troy. And here we have a standard weather conditions thingamajig for most Total War games, and well, okay. Sieges are a little bit better than in Warhammer, but not by much, and I'm sorry, I need to fiddle with the graphics for a second. I'm having slight performance issues with the game when I've set everything to Ultra, but lowering it down just a tiny bit seems to fix it, so I'm not going to complain too much. But, again, like, design decision is one thing. Currently, the battle's going to look like this. I'm going to take all my infantry and throw it at the walls. And that's it. There's nothing else I could do. I could build a battering ram to take down the gate, but that's not necessary. My hero's going to do it almost as quick. So now, I believe you're beginning to understand the problem. By the way, I'm so used to speed settings being up here that I constantly am reaching for them. At least the towers don't have infinite range. That would have driven me crazy, but for now, what we do is just that. And we'll take... Well, okay, I guess we can take 2 of these. Instead of sending them there, we'll send them through the gate. And the hero can break the gate down, and these guys can stand there and hit things. But mind you, they're javelin men, so they can't even shoot arrows at the... or shoot javelins at the enemy, because they don't outrange them. Towers have arrows, though. This is no problem. Towers have all the arrows they want. Yeah. This is an issue. And also another one that I think we might not get to see is what's going to end up happening if your hero is fighting someone is, well, if it's fighting someone that's like a hero unit or a special unit like this, what's going to end up is they're going to duel no matter what you do. So even if you have 10 infantry units fighting with your hero, they're just going to make a circle around, and they're not going to interfere. Now, I understand the whole honorable duels thing and so on and so forth, but at the same time, in Three Kingdoms, this was a lot better. It was an option. You could duel if you wanted to, but in this game, this isn't a matter of choice. You're sort of forced to duel a lot of the time. And that's not great.
Your ladders have a foothold on their walls.
So yeah, my ladders have a foothold up the walls. Fair enough, but I'm going to lose a lot of my men due to their javelins and archers being here. Well, they don't have archers, just javelin men, I suppose. And then we're just going to scale the walls, and that's it. And the AI is silly when it comes to scaling walls. Oh boy, is the AI silly.
Your warriors are attacking the gates.
Sometimes the AI is just gonna have a derp and half the unit's gonna be here and half the unit's gonna be here, and they're gonna get confused. I've seen that happen. Sometimes when you're at the plaza, for example, in sieges, I'm focusing specifically on sieges because I think they tend to break the AI most often. I was taking the plaza with this other time, and the enemy was just going back and forth, touching the plaza and leaving. Eventually they came in to fight me, but actually one time they didn't. They just stood there. Fighting on the walls is damn near impossible. The AI is just silly about it. They move back and forth, they don't actually stop to fight. Scaling the walls is awkward and difficult. And I'm going to lose like 30% of all of my men without even putting up a fight.
The enemy gates have been destroyed.
Yeah. Also, there's no blood. Any blood at all, whatsoever. I understand that there's a Blood and Gore DLC, but I was always of the opinion that that should add maybe a few more kill animations and make all the fighting fancy.
You have captured the gates.
But now there's no blood at all, and that's still a thing that they're doing, and it pisses me off to no end. To this day. Okay, let's see how they handle fighting on the walls. See, these guys are going that way. The fighting's happening there and there. That's to say, in the polar opposite direction. And then these guys are just going to get confused as well. See, look at this. I've ordered them to fight the enemy, and what they're doing is...
Your warriors are losing heart.
What are they doing exactly? And my warriors are losing heart. Of course they are. Of bloody course they are. Hero units are also insanely powerful. I don't have a problem with that, I'm just stating. And also if you do this... Well, now they've captured the gate, I guess you might as well go around, but... They can't move. They have problems moving around the battlefield. If your troops can't move around the battlefield, that's a serious issue with the game. And what's supposed to be an easy siege is going to be tremendously difficult, mainly due to the reason that my men aren't doing what I told them. Now, I'm okay if that's a game mechanic. If, you know, in the chaos of battle, they're not going to be moving as precisely and stuff, and that's actually an idea for a game like that, you know, you don't exactly control your units, you just give them orders, and how they follow them, and, you know, to what degree of accuracy will depend on stuff like maybe their experience or whatever. But this is not a game feature, this is just AI failing at basic pathfinding. Again, their orders are to fight over here right now. They're on the wall, and I'm not even sure what they're doing.
By Ares, your warriors are rallying.
This isn't good. This isn't good. This needs a lot of fixing. And I do mean a lot of fixing. Again, I've ordered my units to charge that way. Now they're moving backwards again. Like, why are you moving backwards? I understand, I guess it's to try and form up. But even then, this is stupid and hideous and just wrong in so many different ways and levels. And the pathfinding can be so bad that my hero, a killing machine, basically has killed 6 soldiers. And he wasn't dueling anyone. I'm not dueling with him.
Your warriors have been routed.
It's really not good. It's really, really, really not good. I guess we'll try and shoot over the walls, this would be useful. Yeah, I guess. Oh, they've broken too. I've also noticed that the units tend to break for no reason for sometimes, which is very strange. Like, at times they will break without even making contact with the enemy, which... Okay, fair enough, I'm playing this on hard difficulty, but that's, like, nowhere near the hardest. So... what gives? Seriously, what gives? Yeah. Anyways, though, be that as it may, it's playable. It's not terrible, but at the same time, like these units are routing, right? Not that I can tell, but they're routing. It's strange. It's strange and frustrating. The combat is just that, strange and frustrating. And it's such a shame because I feel like it has great potential, simply because of all the campaign map mechanics, right? There's so many things going on with the campaign map. Oh, so exceptional warriors found, right, lovely, excellent. Regiments of Renown, I assume something like that, or the equivalent to, I guess. Yeah, it's... I understand it on some levels, but on some it's really difficult to grasp. It seems like the type of thing of, you know, let's remove cavalry, let's remove catapults and trebuchets, and yes, I know, Bronze Age, I'm not supposed to have a trebuchet. At the same time, though, I feel like that's one of those areas where they could just go the ahistorical route, and maybe give me minotaurs and stuff instead. Centaurs out the arse, you know, pardon my language, to make up for the fact that there is no cavalry. I feel like had they gone the more fantastical route, this would have been such a better game. It would have made combat actually something to enjoy and to look forward to. As is, combat is just boring and something that I really want to auto-resolve all the time because it comes down to just throwing units at each other and occasionally moving around skirmishes. There's nothing more to it. A lot of the you'd expect combat to get more interesting and more flavorful towards the end, right? It gets less interesting because the meta towards the end of the game and towards the later stages becomes heavy infantry. So, and heavy infantry has this great ability to be slow, armoured, and resistant to flanking. Yes, you cannot flank them, so what ends up being the problem is instead of becoming more interesting, the combat, as you progress, it devolves further into just slamming heavy infantry against each other with no tactics whatsoever. And it feels like a compromise that's been made for new players that tend to get outplayed a lot by the AI circling around them. Yes, look, I know, and I've been an active member of several forums and groups for Total War, especially aimed at newer players, well, not newer players, but especially welcoming towards newer players looking for advice, and people, you know, when they've never played a strategy game before, tend to do very stupid things at the beginning, but the solution is not to just dumb everything down, to having the combat be just mashing two blobs of infantry together. The solution is to have a good tutorial. And the game tutorializes a lot of the campaign stuff pretty darn well, if you're willing to read, which a lot of people aren't, so, you know, so much for that. I still maintain, by the way, that Rome had the best tutorial, the original Rome. Total War had the best tutorial of any Total War game, and if you want to get into Total War, you should still play that game first, I think, in my modest opinion, because it just tutorializes it so darn well. It explains the fundamental gameplay basic mechanics behind every Total War game, and, you know, those bleed in one way or another into every next installment of Total War, and they just get a little bit different. As you can see, the trade AI is still as bright as ever, but hey. Okay, this is actually a little bit better, but it's also horrible because I would never accept something like that. Completely unfair agreement, but, you know, hey. It is what it is. There's also no quest battles in the game, at least not that I've seen so far, which, you know. Those were cool, I really liked those, and it offered the game a sort of opportunity to give you an interesting battle without having to rely on the AI doing well even with all its cheats, it tends to just be a bit slow and dumb at times. So, yeah. Anyways. Oh, whoops. Okay, let's not do that.
Open the gates.
Well, I guess one more skirmishers. Yeah, one more skirmish unit will do. Okay. So, what are we left with then? Well, like I mentioned, we're left with a weird mix of great mechanics incorporated beautifully together from various different influences and sources of previous Total War games with a dreadful, truly dreadful battle design. And I think as short as this video is, at least for a game as big as this, I think I should leave it off there as first impressions. If you're interested, there will be a playthrough, a mini playthrough of this starting tomorrow on the channel, so you're going to be able to see a little bit more about the game and a little bit more about the specifics of the various decrees and diplomacy. Well, diplomacy I think I've shown off fairly well, but of the divine will and divine omens and stuff like that. You're going to be seeing a little bit more specifically what exactly those do, as well as a little bit more combat and stuff, but I think as a first impressions, as a basic TLDR to what the game's problems are and what the game is, I think this will do. Yeah, that's gonna be about it. It's okay. It's by no means as bad as some people make it out to be, like the worst Total War ever or whatever. Especially not because, I mean, the game's free right now on Epic. You can go and pick it up. And it's free to keep, so it's not just free to play for one day. It's actually just free to keep permanently if you pick it up now. And yeah, it's good, but
I love a challenge. On target.
It's also bad at the same time. It has a lot of bad things, has a lot of good things to it. There we go. I wish I could end off on a more positive note and just, you know, enjoy the game a little bit more, but as it is, the game needs a lot of fixing to fix its combat, but my hope is that some of these mechanics and some of these new ideas that have been introduced here from the completely new team that's been developing this game will transfer over into their next project, or at least in the next CA Total War project, and that we're going to perhaps see some of this in future historical Total War games. But as is, with a combat system that's lacking and a great campaign mode, I can't fully recommend this game. What I can recommend for you to do is to go and try it out yourselves, especially because it's free, and then after the first 24 hours it's going to be 49 euros, I believe, regionally, so prices will vary, of course. So I definitely would recommend that you try it out before hating on it or criticizing it, because the game is receiving a lot of negativity nowadays. You know, even after its release, and a relatively okay score from critics. I think the average score was around 8 out of 10, which this is not an 8 out of 10 Total War game. Not with this kind of combat system, in my modest opinion, but it's not a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's an improvement from Thrones of Britannia, which is not exactly high praise. And I think it could learn a lot from the combat in Warhammer and Three Kingdoms, and just make it more interesting for everyone, really, because even though it's more simple and more welcoming to newer players, it doesn't mean it's better for anyone. So yeah, that's about it. I'm going to leave it there, pretty short. If you have any questions about the game, feel free to ask me down in the comments below and I will respond to them. But for now, I guess I'll see you tomorrow if you're interested in a small Let's Play as Aeneas. I skipped the first battle of colonizing Alcibe, and I just went forward immediately afterwards. But yeah, anyways, until next time, another video, my name's Juggernaut. Like, subscribe down below if you enjoy the video and want to support the channel. It really helps out quite a bit. And also if you want to stay tuned with the rest of the content that I produce here. Until some other time though, like I said, have fun, take care, and bye-bye.